Excellent. So we will get started. Welcome everyone to our Thursday Naturalist Nights. My name is Phoebe, and I'm a naturalist and educator here at ACES. And I just wanted to welcome you to the Western Yellow-billed Cuckoo talk by Jason Beason. But before we get into introducing him and our topic tonight, I just would love to thank our sponsors for these events. We couldn't put this event on without them. Tonight our event is especially sponsored by Aspen Snowmass. And these Naturalist Nights are brought to us by the Aspen Center for Environmental Studies, the Wilderness Workshop, and the Roaring Fork Audubon Society. And these are our other sponsors that we have. They run every Wednesday night at 5:30 at the 3rd Street Center in Carbondale and 7 o'clock on Thursdays at ACES, right here where you guys are. And we will be doing a raffle, so if you didn't get to sign in on your way here, we do have little sign-in cards that are to be entered in our raffle at the end of the season, or we might do ones throughout the season, but please feel free to fill out one of those little cards. You can fill them out every single time that you come to a Naturalist Night so that you increase your chances of winning. Each week, our Naturalist Nights are also filmed by Grassroots TV so that if you miss it or someone you know might miss it, they can always watch it on the Wilderness Workshop's website or ACES website as well. So, without further ado, I'll bring you back to our topic at hand. Tonight we will be listening to Jason Beason tonight on the Western Yellow-billed Cuckoo. Jason is the Special Monitoring Projects Coordinator at the Rocky Mountain Bird Observatory, and he focuses on survey projects involving low-density species responding to the impacts of climate change and their effects on birds, and conducting research on bird migration throughout the Rocky Mountain region. I've always been super passionate about migratory birds and climate change and just birds in general, and I know that a number of us have just begun our passion in birding, so we will be excited to hear about this. Jason also has a family farm right outside of Paonia, and it's called the Rain Crow Farm, and fun fact I just learned today is that Rain Crow is an Appalachian folklore name for the cuckoo. So, and he runs it with his family, and last year, or currently, they bird, and they are very proud of the habitat that they create on their farm for the species that live there, and their bird list is currently 186 species. 187. Yeah. Awesome. So, that is very, very great. So for the Western Yellow-billed Cuckoo, mouthful, it's a shy bird species and loves the riparian habitat. And it has been, has had their population decreased because of increase in dams and excessive grazing and decrease in habitat. And on November 3rd, 2014, it was registered as a threatened species west of the Continental Divide under the Endangered Species Act. So this is a very new, Colorado's newest threatened species. And hopefully with increased listing and the increased knowledge of the Western-billed cuckoo, hopefully we will be able to learn a little bit more about its breeding and its habitat needs, and maybe be able to help with this population decrease. And with further ado, Jason Beason will be able to explain the Western Yellow-billed Cuckoo and its habitat and threatened status much better than I can. So without further ado, welcome Jason Beason, please.
Right. Thanks, Phoebe. Do I need to use the? No, okay, good. Okay, great. All right, hello everybody. I drove over, I did the talk yesterday in Carbondale, and I'm glad to be up here. I did a talk here a few years ago. I think it was on black swifts, but I can't remember. So So this is a picture of a yellow-billed cuckoo, and this was actually taken in Hotchkiss at a site where we found the nest. We've only found one nest during our surveys. In 2008 through 2011 we did surveys, and the nest was real close to this cottonwood tree, and so I really like the picture. The guy from Grand Junction took that. So cuckoos, there's a lot of different cuckoo species around the world, in Europe and that area, and also the Americas. And most of them are tropical birds. You know, like in the tropics, there's just so much more diversity. And you guys may recognize, oh, I've got a little laser pointer, don't I? This guy right there is a greater roadrunner. That's in the cuckoo family. And there's, actually there's a book just on the cuckoos, and I could have brought it with me. I should have brought it with me. But they're just really amazing birds. And a lot of the cuckoos are parasitic, which, you know, brown-headed cowbirds around here, they lay their eggs, and other species nest and allow them to raise their young. And some of the cuckoo species do that. More in the old world are parasitic, and some in the Americas are. And yellow-billed cuckoos are sometimes parasitic, and we don't really know why or how often it happens. They're a very secretive species, so it's difficult to study them, but sometimes they will lay their eggs in other birds' nests. And here's the North American, or not North American, but the cuckoos that are in the United States. The black-billed cuckoo are there on the left, and then the one on the right are the yellow-billed. And the black-billed, you know, it's got an all-black bill and a red eye ring. And the tail, you can kind of see, is just not as marked as the yellow-billed cuckoo. And these are Sibley drawings here of the yellow-billed cuckoo. But they're fairly similar in behavior and their the way they look. But their vocalizations are different. And I don't have a vocalization of a black-billed cuckoo, but I do have vocalizations of a yellow-billed cuckoo. And this is the one. I have to turn up the volume here. And then this is the vocalization that most people, when they think of a cuckoo, is called the cop call, but it's kind of that guttural like sound. And then here is this is a recording I got when I was standing near the nest, and I didn't know the nest was there, and then the bird was very nervous and flying around me. And then we found the nest a little bit later, and they say that they make this sound. Sounds like just a really quick, like a person knocking on a door really fast. But I got this recording. It was that day, that July 21st, 2008, when we found the nest. And it's going to go again. But the bird was just flying around, and there were a lot of big grasshoppers, and I think that's what it was eating. And here is the call that, it's kind of in the background, it's hard to hear. That sounds like a puppy dog whining, kind of. And I've heard, at our farm, like this year in July, I heard this sound almost every day. It was a really good year, and we never, we didn't find a nest or anything, but it seemed like it was a good year, at least around the Paonia area for cuckoos. So hopefully they nested around there. And Paonia Hotchkiss seems to have a surviving population of yellow-billed cuckoos. But this call is practically the only one I've heard, besides when I was near the nest. And then another time I heard a knocker call. So I think if you guys want to go out and look for cuckoos, they're very difficult to see, but if you know what they sound like, then you'll have a better chance at finding them. Sure. Okay. Oops, loud. That's not too bad. And this is a recording. There's a website called Zenocanto. I don't know if there's any bird nerds in here, but that's a really amazing. There's bird sounds from throughout the world, and I just took that one off there. And the coo call is one I got near Paonia also. There's the knocker, which is similar to the call. some space between there. And then I'll do there's a lot of other birds in the background of this one that you kind of hear the chat. They kind of remind me of cuckoos. Everybody's hearing the cuckoo though, right? The puppy dog kind of whining there. Similar to a dove. So. And I've heard, I think that sound travels pretty far, maybe like a quarter, half a mile. I'm pretty sure, like I hear the birds at our farm, and I'm pretty sure they're across the river. So, if it's not too windy and quiet, you can hear that from pretty far away. It's kind of a long recording. And then this one I just put in there for fun. That's the cuckoo clock, or this is actually what the common cuckoo in Europe sounds like. So. All right. Anybody want to hear any of them again, or you okay with that? Okay. Cuckoos migrate pretty far. There's actually been some research recently where there's these little devices called geolocators, and you attach it to a bird. It's like a backpack that they will carry, and the devices records like day length. So if you know how long the day is and like the time the sun came up and it went down, you can kind of pinpoint where on the planet the bird was. But you have to put the device on the bird, and then a year later after it migrates, you have to get it off and then download the data. So that's kind of can be tricky with a bird and especially cuckoos, they're kind of nomadic. You don't know if they're going to breed at the same general area every year. But they do go. There's a map they published. At least one of the research about the birds' migration. They published it, I think it was in Western Birds, so if you want to go look for that. And the bird did go to Colombia and then maybe a little bit further south into South America. But they really bounced around a lot. They were like in Colombia for a couple months, and then they went up to like the West Indies, and then they were in Mexico, and then they went back to New Mexico is where they tracked the bird from. And then it went to Mexico, and then I'm going to talk about the breeding cycle. One of the differences, the Western population, they don't get back to their breeding sites until late May, early June. So they're a very late migrant, compared to like yellow warblers or typical riparian species. The Eastern population gets back in like late April, early May to like the eastern. They breed throughout the eastern U.S. So that's pretty different. And then the Western birds will nest. They have a really rapid nest cycle, and then they're gone. I'll turn this volume down. By late August, early September. So that's they're not in at their breeding sites for very long. And there's also some yellow-billed cuckoos that they have documentation of them in Colombia or in South America during the summer. So maybe some of them breed down there, and then their range goes throughout Mexico and Central America too, where they breed. Their diet, they like big bugs. Like I said, at that Hotchkiss nest site, there's a lot of really big grasshoppers there, and I think that's why they like this area. And I'm going to talk more about the habitat there. It's kind of an interesting site. But katydids, I don't know, are katydids up around here in the summertime? They're maybe a little bit lower elevation, but around Paonia and Hotchkiss in the fall, you can hear them. You can recognize they do like a clicky sound, like. I hear them a lot around our farm. And then grasshoppers, cicadas is probably one of their foods that they eat. There was actually a sighting of 2 cuckoos up by Steamboat Springs in like aspen gamble oak habitat, which kind of throws everything off if they start finding them often there, because there's so much of that in western Colorado. It could be a problem for people trying to get out and survey for them. But any big bugs, and they've also been documented taking birds' eggs out of the nest and eating the eggs, and nestlings, small frogs. So their diet can be quite varied, even berries and fruit also. So, and then the young, like the adults will, eat, they'll fill up their belly and they can return to the nest and then regurgitate for the young like a lot of other bird species do. This is a picture of a yellow-billed cuckoo nestling, probably only a couple days old. And yeah, they look, there was a posting on some bird site about they found the nest and they said it looks like a porcupine cuckoo love child. It's kind of a funny way to describe it, but it does those, all birds have the feather sheaths when they grow, and then you can see this right here is when they're kind of opening. And they say that on the cuckoos that you can almost see it like opens really rapidly, like burst open sometimes. But incubation, they only incubate 9 to 11 days, which is pretty short. But the amazing thing is once they hatch out of the egg, they can be out of the nest in 5 days and like already moving around, not flying maybe, but walking, and maybe flying within a week of hatching. When we found our nest near Hotchkiss, we looked in the nest, and then the nestlings looked like this guy. And then I went back 2 days later, and they were gone. It was like a shoot, and I didn't have my camera when we found the nest. So then I actually got to see, or I saw one of the cuckoos was like a couple of feet from the nest, one of the fledglings. So I got a picture of that guy, which I'll have I think it's the next slide. But that's just an amazingly quick nest cycle. Stephen Lehman, who's kind of the guy who's compiled all the information for the listing of the species, studied cuckoos yellow-billed cuckoos in California, and he witnessed sometimes there'd be helpers or not one of the male-female pair, and he thinks it could be like a young male that will help tend the nest, which is pretty interesting. There's a few species that have been documented doing this. And in one instance, he saw 2 females and 2 males attending the same nest. So it's kind of interesting, they don't know what's gone on there, but it's kind of interesting bird behavior. So the parasitism this is a photo of a common cuckoo. Look how big that guy is in the nest, and the reed warbler in Europe. But a lot of the European species are more parasitic, but mostly in eastern North America, where the yellow-billed cuckoos have been more studied, they've been shown to parasitize black-billed cuckoos, robins, catbirds, and wood thrushes mostly. When I was working on a project in Oklahoma, and the guy found a cuckoo egg in a mourning dove nest there, so they have been documented parasitizing other species. And they don't know, like maybe in years when prey is more abundant and they have an easier time finding food, maybe they'll produce extra eggs, and they can't take care of them all, or they take advantage of their ability to parasitize other nests. So they don't really know. There's a lot of research that could be done on that probably. And I guess that they've actually documented brown-headed cowbirds laying their eggs in cuckoo nests. So that's kind of quandrum or interesting behavior. But the cuckoos, they think they develop so rapidly that they may just leave the nest and not work, and the cowbird's probably going to just starve. And other behavior, mostly with the surveys, it can be very different very difficult to find the cuckoos. With some research in Arizona, they had cuckoos with radio telemetry. They go out, with the Yagis, and they can find them again. And she would go out, and she knew they were close, and she'd play the call. And only a third of the time would they call back or come closer to the observer, so they knew, that they were interested. So 2/3 of the time, they just ignored the call. So they're just not very territorial. They don't seem to be too concerned about, other cuckoos maybe in their territory. And so that makes, conducting surveys very difficult. When we do our surveys, we'll go out and we go like 100 meters, play the call, go 100 meters, play the call, and it's like a 7-minute waiting period. We're like playing the call every minute. But since they don't respond every time, you don't really know if you're missing them. So, and another problem, like when most people are out doing bird surveys, they usually occur in like early May, mid-May for your typical riparian bird species. And if these guys aren't getting back until late May, early June, it's just they are really difficult to survey for. So, and I'll keep going. So this map kind of shows what they speculate. There used to be kind of throughout the West and all the major rivers, the riparian systems have really changed probably the last 100 years. They used to be probably a lot more extensive and wider rivers. And it's not really accurate because there are cuckoos in Colorado, Utah, and Idaho. And they used to be in Washington, Oregon. They haven't been there since, I'm going to talk about it. And then in California, too, they estimate there used to be a lot more cuckoos. But Arizona and New Mexico seems like there's still kind of a pretty healthy population. And they got listed last year, but they were first proposed for listing in 2001. And they were warranted but precluded, I guess is how they word it. And here's just a picture of, riparian habitat that's obviously been altered mostly by grazing probably. So there's a lot of, rivers in the West have really changed and they're used for, timber and all those other resources, water. So the western population, what they call the western distinct population segment, was listed in November last year. And in Colorado, it's considered a species of greatest conservation need. So they're, I checked the Federal Register. You can go on and see people's comments about, like when species is listed. And I noticed the state of Colorado recommended that they not be listed for some reason. I don't know why they would do that, but maybe a lot of politics with listing of species. And also the eastern population is declining. The breeding bird survey, the breeding bird survey routes that people run throughout the 48 states and then in Canada too, they're noticing a downward trend for the eastern birds. So it seems like a lot of neotropical migrants are declining. So here it kind of shows this is British Columbia, and they used to occupy the very southern part of there, way up to Canada. That was like their furthest north that they had been documented breeding. But it's been a long time. Even in Oregon, Washington, it's been since the 1920s, 1950s since they were found up there. I think there's been some reports recently in southern Oregon, so they may be a small population there. In California, there used to be a lot of cuckoos, and now they're down to, well, this says 30 pairs, but I've heard more like 100 pairs or so now. The Central Valley where a lot of our vegetables are grown, I'm sure that wetland system has been changed, considerably. Nevada, there's, I'm just going to go through the states to kind of show you, like what the population, if there's like 100 pairs in California, only maybe they found them in 11 places in Nevada during the first breeding bird atlas there. So that's a pretty small population. Idaho, maybe a dozen pairs. Utah, there's maybe just a few pairs. So that's, in all of those states, there could be maybe just 100, maybe 200 pairs. In New Mexico, it seems like there's a fairly healthy population there, maybe, as I say, 1,000 pairs maybe, or in 99 it was 100 to 200, but in the 80s there was maybe more. And then Arizona seems like there's a pretty healthy population down there still. And Wyoming, there's, and like we mentioned, it's just west of the divide, and the divide goes through right there. There's more birds in the east. There's some down on the Green River. Seeds Kitty National Wildlife Refuge, I think, has some really nice riparian habitat, and they found cuckoos there. In western Colorado, I've done quite a bit of searching for historical information, and it's pretty difficult. There's, reports of cuckoos around Palisade, just east of Grand Junction. In the 50s and 60s, they say the naturalists recorded their presence, and they were probably breeding a few pairs anyway back then. And there's been a few reports in Grand Junction recently too, so there may be a few birds around there still. Right at Delta in Delta County, where the Uncompahgre and the Gunnison Rivers come together, in the 80s, I guess there was a couple years where there was a lot of cuckoos around, and maybe it was because of some insect outbreak. They're very nomadic, and they'll seem to find insects. If there's like bagworms or tent caterpillars, I guess that. So I think more in the east, but there's some of those in the west too sometimes. And if there's a big outbreak of those, the cuckoos might concentrate in that area and take advantage of it. When we started our surveys, I contacted the biologists in Arizona who were doing a lot of research, and they said, well, if you're going to go out and look for cuckoos, probably should stay below like around 5,000 feet elevation. And Colorado, there's not a lot of areas lower than 5,000 elevation. Like around Grand Junction, I guess, the Colorado River, and plus we were finding them in other places higher than that. So the people in Arizona were pretty amazed at where we were finding them. During the first Breeding Bird Atlas, which are projects that happen every 20 years or so in every state, they only found cuckoos in 3 spots in western Colorado. So that's, but there was one, they confirmed them nesting up by, what's the name of that? Carpenter Ranch. It's Nature Conservancy property. It's a really nice riparian system up there, and they found, or somebody saw a bird carrying food. So if you see a bird, with food in its beak, it's probably going to take it to the nest and not eating it itself. In '98, Cohen Dexter, who's a ornithologist and lives in Nucla, he did a project with the BLM and just floated rivers, listening and playing the call. And he didn't find any cuckoos in that summer, but there was some reported in the Grand Junction area that year. So that's pretty bleak for that time period for cuckoos. This is a picture of the North Fork of the Gunnison. Hotchkiss is down there, and then Paonia's upstream just a little bit. But there seems like there's some pretty nice riparian habitat still along the North Fork. And one of the things, you hear a lot about water control and the dams, and the river, the North Fork River, in the spring, it's raging. It's like 2,000 CFS. But then, in the summertime, it goes down to just a couple hundred CFS. And I think that has a lot to do with, like the cottonwood regeneration and just, a healthy riparian system. So that might be another reason for the decline, the damming of the rivers and, the water control. So in, I think 2003 was the first year that Andrea Robinsong is a birder that lives in Hotchkiss. She reported cuckoos, and she's had them in her yard every year since then, and they're probably breeding around that area. And there's another site near, or it's pretty close to her, where we found that nest in 2008. They've been reported 2008 through this year. They were back in that same spot. So, and we tried to get permission to do a lot of this riparian stretch here is owned by one ranch, and they didn't grant us permission to do to access their property, so we didn't get to do surveys in there. But I thought about trying, just float the rivers and play the call, and I haven't got to do that yet. But hopefully next year, I'll get in the rivers and go down there. And then my yard, which is just upstream a little bit, I saw a cuckoo in 2005, and we've had them pretty much every year, or we've had them every year since then. So there seems like there's a population around Paonia also. And then in the San Luis Valley, which is actually east of the Continental Divide, but they included the Rio Grande as part of the Western Distinct Population Segment range. So that's included. So there seems like there's a population down there on the Conejos River. And that's a really amazing riparian area or habitat down there, if you ever get down there. Our surveys in 2008, we got funding from what's now Parks and Wildlife, and then it was Division of Wildlife, and BLM. We did the Uncompahgre Field Office lands, and then U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service also provided some funding. So I'm hoping now that they're listed that there'll be maybe some funding available again. But we haven't done any surveys since 2011. We've had a little bit of citizen science effort and people getting out looking for cuckoos and doing the call playback surveys. The years we did do surveys, you can see the places here in western Colorado where we surveyed. This is the Yampa River up here, and we did a little bit in Dinosaur National Monument, so went over the border in Utah, and this is around Grand Junction. And we actually did have a detection right where the Gunnison and the Colorado come together, and I don't know why that star is missing. And this is the North Fork area and down Delta, and this is over in Nucla, where Cohen lives, he's heard them in a private ranch over there. And then this is the Rio Grande too, and I didn't put the dots there for some reason, but I think the Conejos is probably down over like in that area. And then we went down to Canyon of the Ancients. The Yellow Jacket Canyon has some nice riparian area. And then down on the Southern Ute Reservation, I got permission to do some surveys. So we covered a lot of ground, but there's still a lot out there, like the Uncompahgre River, which is down here. We didn't really hit that very well. So it would take a huge effort to really get to all the riparian habitat in western Colorado. So, and this is just a closer map of the Paonia-Hotchkiss area showing where we did the surveys. So the X's were survey points, and then we had the birds where the circles are. And here's a picture. This is the fledgling. He's like a week-old cuckoo that, and the nest. There's a bad picture of the nest, and this bird was only a couple feet from that nest up that branch. But you'll notice this is a Russian olive tree, which is the evil invasive species that everybody's trying to get rid of. So it's kind of a problem. You know, the cuckoos are definitely using this area, and it's dominated by Russian olive. So I've talked with it's a land owned by the city of Hotchkiss, and I'm trying to get them to not remove the Russian olives here because I think the cuckoos will just not disappear because that's pretty much the only, shrub that's in there. And cuckoos just like their habitat requirements are just really dense, like places that are hard to walk through, like riparian areas and then Russian olive, can be super dense. So, and they've been documented using tamarisk, which, is another invasive species that's on the nobody wants it list. And down in, I think the Pecos River in New Mexico, they found them using that. But we haven't found it in Colorado, but we didn't really do a lot of surveys in tamarisk. And here's just a picture. You'll notice this is the old Hotchkiss water treatment plant right near town. And this is the nest tree. And, this is the other side, what it looks like over there. And you'll notice it's just mostly Russian olive. There's a few cottonwoods. And I thought, when we started our surveys where we'd find them, it'd be, beautiful, nice riparian galleries, pristine riparian galleries. But, this wasn't what I was expecting. But that's where we found the nest. So. And another thing, I mentioned, that the Arizona biologist said, well, stay below 5,000 feet. And this may be part of, climate change. A lot of species are moving up and breeding higher. The Yampa River detections were around 6,800, Montrose 6,100. The North Fork's closer to 5,000. We're finding the birds there. But they've also, that San Luis Valley, the entire San Luis Valley is really high. The bottom of the valley is like 7,500, so they're there. And then up around Gunnison too, there's been some cuckoos reported. And there was a breeding confirmation during the second breeding bird atlas, I think it was 2011, and that's about almost 8,000 feet there too. So it's pretty interesting that they're so much higher than the experts said to look. And also during, I think it was 2008, there were a few reports of cuckoos like mile or two away from the North Fork River, which I thought they'd kind of stay in those corridors, but maybe they'd go out and forage for insects away from the rivers, and they can fly, of course, pretty far. So they go out and find bugs maybe, and then go back to the riparian systems. So yeah, like doing the literature searches, I just had a hard time finding much about the Colorado. So we can't really say that they've declined because we don't know how many there used to be. So that's kind of a problem with the listing. But in California, they have shown that there are a lot less cuckoos than there used to be. So what should like in California, I don't know what the riparian systems, as you get higher up in the mountains, but maybe they should do some more surveys up higher there too. And then New Mexico, the other states. It'd be really interesting to know how many there are, in western Colorado. It seems like, I think around Hotchkiss there may be like 10 pairs, but I'm sure there's other, like the Uncompahgre River, there's just not much information down there. So how many are down there, and then throughout western Colorado. So, and then hopefully we'll get some surveys next year. There's a western yellow-billed cuckoo working group, and they're trying to get a big proposal together for 2016. So I'm hoping, I've been in that group and trying to work with them. So some good news finally. This is this right here, I think, is the Colorado River between, it becomes the border between California, Arizona, and there's a lot of, agriculture, a lot of salad mix, like down on Yuma, people grow salad mix down there, and this is pretty much what the whole area looks like along the river, and there's a lot of, ditches to water, but some of the mitigation money from the Bureau of Reclamation, they thought, well, let's plant these big stands of cottonwoods and willows and see what happens. And they were mainly trying to help the southwestern willow flycatcher, which is an endangered species. And the flycatchers are using these areas, and yellow-billed cuckoos are breeding in there. But it's pretty amazing, like these trees and the willows and the cottonwoods grow so quickly. They're like 10, 20 feet high in 3 years. And the cuckoos were moving in and nesting and that quickly when the habitat comes back. So there's more of this kind of experiment going on where they're planting these trees and shrubs, and the cuckoos are moving in. So there's hope for the population down around that area. And also one of the place where we had a detection of a cuckoo in 2011 was at a Bureau of Rec restoration site, and they planted cottonwoods. I think it was like 2,000. So in 2011, when we had our detection, these trees were like 50 feet tall already, and there was some nice understory, some Russian olive and stuff moving in there, but some willows too, some nice stuff. But and there was a cuckoo there in 2013 also, so that's promising. For at least there's hope for more restoration. So, and that's my last slide. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Yeah.
One of the things that really interests me about the Endangered Species Act is that it's a really powerful piece of environmental legislation, and so it's often used to leverage other environmental actions or conservation movements. And I'm curious about how the fact that the cuckoo is a threatened species rather than an endangered species affects the ability to use it, say, as the basis for protecting riparian zones, which we know are really ecologically important.
Yeah. Yeah, no, well, you probably heard the Gunnison sage grouse was just listed also recently as threatened, and everybody was like, wow, I thought it was going to be endangered, and it really, like the laws and everything that protect the species are a lot more lenient between threatened and endangered. So, but the cuckoo, I was surprised it got listed at all. So, and whether or not it's a good, I think it'll be a good thing because there seems like there's less politics around the cuckoos. So, I don't think a lot of people even know they're in Colorado. So it'll be interesting. Maybe they'll just get more attention. So, yeah.
So it seems like the main survey method is the call and then the response, and it seems like you're getting just such a small response back that it's indicating small populations. Is it possible that there are bigger populations and the cuckoos just recognize that it's not a real?
Yeah, that's something I've thought about. Like our recordings are, you can kind of hear hissing in the background, and so maybe it's and plus they just aren't very territorial. So yeah, we could be missing them, and so I think it's interesting. Like in the North Fork Valley, there's like 4 birders, and they all report hearing cuckoos. So if you're in an area a lot, and like their yards or whatever, and if they hear them, they're like, oh, there's a cuckoo, and then, so there's just not enough people out there that know the sounds of the birds. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
They're not made for life, or do they mate for life? And how many pairs you have? Because you said like
Yeah,
the yellow cuckoo bird can't help whatever to make a nest.
Okay.
It seems, how do you know, how many there really are?
Yeah,
A male with 3 wives.
The question was just if they made it for life or not.
Yeah, there hasn't been much research, yeah. Yep. I think in Arizona, there's been a lot of research, and they had color-banded birds, and they were following them around with the radio telemetry, so they may have found it. But they're a very nomadic species too, so they jump around a lot. So I don't know how, what their fidelity level is. So yeah, who knows? Yeah.
So these are two questions not specifically about the cuckoo, but what do you grow on your farm, and how did you get interested in birding?
Well, we grow a lot of vegetables and flowers for bouquets. I think we sell, there's a guy that delivers over to Butcher's Block. Do they sell vegetables in there? I think that's one of the people that buys. So we do sell restaurants and stuff. And Telluride, there's a few places. And but about any kind of vegetable you name, we probably grow. A lot of different stuff in the flowers. And we go to Crested Butte Farmers Market too. Is the main thing that we have been. I don't think we're going to do it next year. Just do restaurants and stuff. And birding, I got a job in Arizona after I went to school in Ohio, and I wasn't really a birder in college, and then I came out west, and Arizona is such an amazing bird diversity, and I started getting into birds. So that's what got me into it. Just the birds of Arizona, I guess. So yeah.
Any last questions?
Did you say that the west, this one is parasitic or not?
And I think in California there's been a couple documented cases of parasitism, but yeah, there's not as much as in the east. But they're a lot more common in the east too. So
Do they just put their egg in the nest, or do they kick out the other eggs?
just leave their egg, yeah, yeah.
Because I was
Yep.
thinking, some
Yeah.
birds kick out the other eggs, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or their nestlings when they hatch will toss out. Yeah. Very evil. Yeah.
Flycatcher that you were
Yeah.
talking about if they do that.
Yeah, willow flycatchers are actually parasitized by cowbirds fairly often, and that's one of the big problems with their population. Yeah, the endangered species. So, yep.
Any last questions? Well, thank you so much for coming, and thank you so much, Jason. Just want to draw your attention to next week. We also have a fabulous Thursday night speaker for our Naturalist Nights. It's Adam LeWinter. He is a scientist and engineer at the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Cold Region Sector, and he will be presenting on capturing glacial change through 3D time-lapse photography on the Hellam Glacier in Greenland. So that should be really great. We also have our Potbelly Perspectives on Wednesday nights, which are 7 o'clock here. And next week is a Suzuki musical adventure in Japan and Thailand by Heidi Kuratalo. So, without further ado, thank you so much
Thank you.
for coming.
Right.